Aloha and welcome to Mystery, Mystics, and Metaphysics, along with Relationship Empowerment. Today, we're going to talk about the archetype of the victim and how it relates to us spiritually and also in relationship. My name is Geralyn St. Joseph, and I am an intuitive relationship coach as well as a psychic intuitive. So I do all kinds of readings. The reason why we're talking about the victim today is because in our see the victim of a violent crime, although that is a victim also, the key to the victim archetype is that the victim becomes stronger through their victimhood. So the whole idea of the victim is that we sense it, we feel it, we go into it, we mourn the loss of who we were or whatever it was that was taken from us or has been stripped from us. But then we navigate out of it into something better, into something healthier. And I know there are circumstances where there's not necessarily better. I know there are times where, like, you lose everything. I had a dear friend who, at only 16 years old, had a horrific car accident. He was in the car with three other guys, and he became a quadriplegic. And he lived for a long time after that. And in the beginning, it was the most horrific thing ever. But through it, he found his sense of humor. He found his meaning in going to high schools and talking to the kids about drinking and driving and about being mature enough and understanding long-term consequences. And he said many times to me that if he helped even one person not make the same mistakes that he did, then his life was worth it. So that's where you turn from a victim into a savior. He went from feeling sorry for himself and just not wanting to exist anymore to finding that his life does have a purpose, even though he can't do the things that he dreamt of and that he wanted to do originally, that his life does have a purpose. And he did change a lot of lives and really inspired a lot of people because of his fortitude, even through like the worst thing you could possibly, one of the worst things you could possibly think of happening to you physically. So it's about moving through it. It's not about putting the mantle of victimhood on and then holding on to it and becoming so attached to it that that is your identity. The victim is an archetype. It should never be your identity. You should never identify as the victim. And that's where we move from an archetype into an illness almost. There is a secondary gain with being any number of things, but there's definitely a secondary gain with claiming to be the victim or with moving from the victim archetype into the victim mindset. People will manipulate from this mindset. Don't you feel bad for me? Shouldn't you be doing things for me? Shouldn't you try harder for me? There is a gain there, even though they're the downtrodden and they're putting out this energetic that seems very weak. But if you really feel into the energy of the victim, it's very spongy. What they're doing is they're pulling energy from everybody around them. So does this mean that everybody who is a victim of circumstance or a victim of something, that from the moment they become a victim and they know that they're a victim, that they become this essence? No, this is something where, yes, someone who's a victim is going to require more energy from the people around them in order to help them to heal. However, it's when it becomes your purpose to be a victim that things become skewed. So we have to be careful. All of us have had a time in our lives. I have never met anybody who has gone through life unscathed. Never. I am 55 years old, and not in any of my lifetimes do I remember ever meeting anyone who went completely unscathed, no matter what kind of a lifetime they had. And it could be mostly good, it could be 90% good. It doesn't mean you don't have a good life. It just means that you're going to get hurt at some point. It's just a part of life. And you need to know and learn how to deal with that. And that's where the victim archetype comes in. When you're hurt, how do you recover from that? How do you get away from that? How do you heal? How do you pull your energy back in? How do you take back what's yours? When we look at this, we understand that the victim should be a short-term position. It shouldn't be your lifetime position. Even when we look at, I mean, if you want to go into biblical times or different stories where the main character is like a victim of like major violence, or maybe they were sold into slavery, or maybe they were born really poor. But is that their whole nature? Is that their whole identity? Is their identity the victim? Well, if you don't give me what I want, then you're killing me. Your words are violence. These are all victimhood statements. And what we do is we take that pain and we learn from it, and then we evolve out of it. That's why the victim is very strong. The victim is something that really explodes our growth, both spiritually and relationship wise. Because in relationship, when we realize we've been a victim, maybe to a narcissist or to someone who has cheated on us and lied to us, it helps us define our boundaries, and it helps us become more secure in who we are if we use it that way, if we allow it to make us stronger and we want to move out of victimhood. Now, as I said, there's the victim mentality. The victim mentality comes along when this is serving you, like you're with a partner who has lied or cheated or done something. And your requirement of them for you to heal is you need to build back that trust, and you need to re-engage in the relationship if you're going to keep that relationship. But the caveat is you never tell them what it is that you need. You just forever, every tiny little mistake, anything that goes on, you can hold that against them and beat them down with it, so that they're always reacting and feeling guilty and trying harder and trying harder and trying harder. The problem with this kind of relationship is that it's not a healthy relationship at all. And if you're punishing someone for something and there's never an end goal, there's never a time where you're like, okay, I'm beginning to trust you more, let's try this, and you become more loving and you actually do re-engage in the relationship, then all you're doing is creating hell on earth for yourself and the other person. And you're manipulating them with your victimhood. By the same token, someone who, oh, this reminds me of, I think it was King of the Hill, showing my age, I know, but I already told you I'm 55. There was an episode where I think like the father-in-law or somebody got hurt on their property. So then they were taking care of the person, and the person really milked it for a really long time. I know there's been a lot of sitcoms with that kind of storyline where they get hurt and then people want to take care of them and help them get healthy, but they so love being taken care of that they stay in that space. That's the victim mentality. Using victimhood to manipulate the people around you, not healthy, not helping you, not helping them. And whether you're on the, identifying as victim side of it, or you're on the other side getting beat over the head with by the victim, it doesn't work for either of you. It's not healthy for either of you. It's never going to change. It's a dynamic that will only change if one of you pulls out of that system. And the victim could do it more easily since they are the core of the system and you're just kind of on top of it, or the other person is on top of it. So ask yourself these questions. How do I feel? Am I truly still hurt? How can I make it safe for me to move forward? And acknowledge that not being the victim really doesn't have anything to do with the other person. It has everything to do with you. You make the choice. You are no longer going to identify as the victim. Yes, that happened to me. Does it mean it didn't happen to you? No, it did happen to you. However, you don't have to be the victim for the rest of your life because something happened to you or a bunch of things happened to you. You can choose, okay, it's time to heal. Now I'm going to move forward from that. What did I learn from that? What did I get from that situation? Being the victim is not a lifetime goal. Being the victim is not something that should be terribly long term. Different situations take a different amount of time. If you had physical injuries, like my friend did, it took him probably a year and a half, 2 years before he finally like came around and recognized his worth. It's going to depend on who's around you too. Who are you listening to? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounding yourself with people who are saying, yeah, well, this is happening to you and that is happening to you? Life happens around us. We choose how we're going to interact with it. Now, does that mean that if you get fired from your job after you've been working there for 30 years, that you shouldn't feel bad about it, or you shouldn't, try to get some kind of compensation for that? No. What that means is if you lose your job after 30 years through no fault of your own, maybe they're downsizing or they went totally AI or whatever the deal is, it's your choice how long you're going to sit in that feeling of worthlessness and that sense of the world happens to me. So ask yourself, where am I? Is this really where I want to be? How am I presenting myself to others? Is the world happening to me? Is life happening to me, or am I participating? And if I'm not participating, what can I do to get there? So that's the upside to the victim archetype, which you can learn a lot by going through being a victim, as horrible as that sounds. And it's the downside of the victim, because when you hold on to it for too long and you start to identify yourself as a victim, as a, you're marginalized, you know, nobody listens to you. This is happening, that's happening, but it's all about things happening to you instead of you taping, being a presence in your own life. But that's up to you. That's your choice. It's not necessarily easy to get out of that kind of thinking, but it is possible. And the first step is to recognize that you're doing it to yourself and that you can look for the good in people, places, and things. Or you can play the victim and act like you don't have any power anywhere or manipulate other people with your lack of power. It's up to you. But the victim is a powerful role, but it's just that. It's not your whole identity. And it never should be. It was never meant to be. It's time to move out of being a victim and move on to becoming empowered as who you are and discovering what it is that you're going to do with your life. If you have any questions, please let me know. And let's see. Where's my cursor? There we go. All right. So, yes, sometimes you do need to jump jobs or change your situation. You're the only one who can change your situation. If you're in a situation that you're not happy with or where you feel unappreciated, you notice like everybody's making $50,000 a year, you're only getting paid 30 and you've been there longer, you're obviously not appreciated. Move on to something else. Or maybe you've just learned everything you can there and you just want a different experience. What I found in the job market oftentimes happens is when you're someplace for a long time and you're like their staple, they don't appreciate you. A lot of times that happens. I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times that happens. And when it happens, if you leave, oftentimes they will ask you to come back. And then there's a renewed sense of your worth. I had a friend who did not have a college degree, but were extremely excellent manager, incredible manager, wonderful with people, great with everything, just above board, amazing. But because she didn't have a college degree, where she was working, and she had worked her way up from when she was a teenager in the same company, they just didn't want to pay her. She had all the duties and was doing all the stuff, but they didn't want to pay her because she didn't have the college degree. So I poached her and took her to the company where I was, and I gave her the position that she was best suited for, which was a general manager position. And then once she worked for me for a year, then her whole company came and poached her back, which we knew. I mean, that was kind of the plan to begin with. But then they came back and they're like, hey, we see that you could do this job. You have the background now. She had the background all along, but they didn't want to pay her because she was there and they knew they could count on her. So they were not giving her what she was worth. So sometimes that's what you have to do. You do have to, move your job. So, and one of our participants is saying, I started off my career in jobs working with employees and found I was pretty good at organizing, recruiting, and training. Unfortunately, this ended up being a time with a lot of recessions. I'm thinking probably the 80s and the 90s. I ended up being assigned to a large team to organize large layoffs in large divisions that caused many people to lose their jobs, as in thousands of people. Although I did other kinds of work, I ended up doing large layoffs in a couple jobs and worked to change employers into a new field. A year later, my new employer started to have major layoffs. Oh no. I said, that's funny because I have this in my background. My boss told me that's why we hired you. I felt like a victim. They knew all along they were going to have major layoffs, but never mentioned it. I went off the deep end and made a decision to go for a major career change in the type of work I was doing to get away from causing people to lose jobs. Yeah, sometimes you get pigeonholed into things, and that's when you need to, if it's not something that you want to do or that you enjoy doing, that's when you need to reinvent yourself. You could do that by going to school, just by going into a different field. And I understand that it's different now than when I was in the job market, because when I was in the job market, what I did was I would just look for anything that looks interesting to me and I would walk in and give them my resume and I would get hired. So I worked all kinds of really interesting jobs that I didn't necessarily have the background for, but I wanted to learn. And because of my presence, walking in, having confidence, talking to them, I would get the job. Now it's a little bit different because you have to deal with a computer instead of people. And I feel like they're losing a lot by doing that. Like the employers are losing so much by not meeting people directly and doing it where it's a human to human interaction instead of going through all this robot stuff. But that's just me. So, yes, a change of pace is excellent. And you can feel like a victim when you've made a decision to get away from something and it kind of follows you. So, how do you completely turn that on its head? It's by drawing the line in the sand and being like, no, I'm not doing this. Not going there, which is what you do, which is excellent. So I think we are done for this evening. Now we're going to move into our discussion portion of the evening. If you want to be part of these discussions, then join us on Meetup. I have two meetups. One is Mystery, Mystics, and Metaphysics, and the other is called Relationship Empowerment, and it's under my name, Geralyn St. Joseph. I will be doing a class covering the rest of the archetypes and how they all develop and what we need from each of them. And that will be at my website at GeralynSt.Joseph.com. And I will post the link once I have everything together. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. Please be sure to subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to this as a podcast. And hopefully we will see you again soon. This is Geralyn St. Joseph, and we are signing off. We're moving into the discussion portion, which you're not going to be privy to if you're not watching this live. Mahalo and blessings.